Hi, my name is Raquel with JJ Safety. Today's woman in history is Dolores Huerta. Dolores Huerta co-founded the National Farm Workers Association with Cesar Chavez in 1962, which is now the United Farm Workers. Dolores directed a national grape boycott to protest the dangers of pesticides on grape pickers, which led the entire California table grape industry to adopt safer practices. She also negotiated the first collective bargaining agreement with an agriculture business to secure better wages and working conditions for farm workers. Today, Dolores is an inspiration in the fight for racial and labor justice. Today's video was originally produced by Good Morning America on March 20, 2020, entitled Dolores Huerta is the fearless labor activist who coined the positive protest slogan, Si se puede. To view the original video by Good Morning America, follow the link in the description.
Dolores Huerta is one of the most influential labor activists of the 20th century. A rebel, a leader, a proud Latina.
Down with racism! Abajo!
Huerta worked tirelessly to launch a workers' rights revolution during a time when the U.S. had a dark history buried in its farm fields and when some were afraid to fight for their rights.
And they said to me, "Oh, Dolores, no se puede." And so my response to them was, "Yes, we can. Si se puede. Si se puede."
She coined the popular protest chant decades before it would become an enduring campaign slogan for President Obama.
Yes, we can.
In the 60s, Huerta, with labor leader Cesar Chavez, was at the helm of the first successful collective bargaining agreement, guaranteeing basic rights to agricultural laborers where there were none before. Her strength and determination helped shape one of the first farm workers' unions. And in turn, Huerta became a pioneer of modern-day social justice. She's a civil rights hero who's also a symbol of change. This is Dolores, and this is her story. Dolores Huerta was born in 1930 in New Mexico. Her parents split up when she was young, and her mother moved the family to California. Growing up, life wasn't always easy as a Mexican-American.
We still have that, we still have that racism that exists that I had to confront when I was a teenager growing up.
Yet she would find strength in a strong mother.
My mother, being an entrepreneur, she always stood out. She always felt that women needed to be in leadership.
By her late 20s, Huerta noticed how horrendous life was for farm workers in California.
They were only earning like 50 cents an hour. They had no unemployment insurance because they migrated from county to county. They weren't even able to have any kind of access to the food banks. They had there were no bathrooms in the field, especially for the women. That was really horrible. So no access to drinking water. They would actually charge them for the water that they would give the workers. And of course, no rest periods. So they were pretty much brutalized. To step up from slavery, you might say that the legacy of slavery lives on.
It was the late 1950s. Many workers were being exposed to dangerous pesticides and had no health benefits.
The issue of pesticide poisoning, unfortunately, still continues.
By her early 30s, Huerta knew it was her calling to fight discrimination and help improve the lives of farm workers. Her first step, joining a grassroots group called Community Service Organization. That's when she met Cesar Chavez and her mentor Fred Ross Sr., a.k.a. the godfather of the farm workers movement.
It was always the men who took the role of leadership. And actually, Cesar and I did have that conversation, and he said, "Well, is it okay if I'm the spokesperson for the organization?" And I said, "Of course, Cesar. I think we would have had that conversation today. I would have said, well, let's do it half and half."
By the 60s, both Mexican and Filipino farm workers employed in the United States were eager for change. In 1965, they started to strike against the Coachella Valley grape growers, known as the Delano Grape Strike. And from there, the United Farm Workers Union came to be.
In California, what you have agribusiness. So you have big major corporations that own thousands and thousands of acres of land. And so the numbers of small farmers, as we think about farmers, is very minute in the state of California. So these are very large landowners, and they employ thousands and thousands of workers.
When striking didn't do the trick, farm workers resorted to boycotting the grape business, traveling far and wide to spread the word. And companies began to respond.
That was grapes! Abajo! That was yellow wine! Abajo!
Within a few weeks of the boycott, they said, okay, we don't want anybody to boycott our liquor. They signed a contract, so we found out that it did work.
But reaching the entire country took time. Activists fought the corporate growers and President Nixon, who was supporting the growers by sending their grapes to soldiers in Vietnam. People across America eventually boycotted grapes.
We're able to get 17 million people to stop eating grapes.
It took 5 years for key demands to be met. When the boycott finally ended, farm workers were guaranteed some basic rights, a first in the history of the United States. After everything had ended, more than 20 California grape growers agreed to begin treating farm workers more fairly. Fighting injustice peacefully was key for Huerta. But when she was 58, she did encounter violence in San Francisco. She'd been protesting agricultural policies.
Presidential candidate George Bush I had a press conference in Fresno, California, saying there's nothing wrong with pesticides. The government takes care of people to make sure they're safe. So I drove up to San Francisco, and we were, protesting his statement that he made. And the police came in and started beating up people in the crowd, and I was one of the victims. They broke, I think, 4 ribs, and they never found my spleen. It was pulverized. He hit me so hard.
Now, on the verge of death after 30 years of activism, she knew it was time to take a break. She was able to reconnect with her 11 children, some who felt their mother had been physically absent from their lives for too long. But Huerta would never stop working for the people.
I actually stayed with the union for 9 years after Caesar died.
Discrimination and sexism were constants in her life as a woman in a male-dominated world. Most of her life, she'd never thought to take credit for her work. But later on, she came to the realization that speaking in favor of women and supporting her community were key for the future. In 2002, Huerta won $100,000 for the Puffin Prize Award. She used this to start the Dolores Huerta Foundation. In 2012, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Obama.
And on a personal note, Dolores was very gracious when I told her I had stolen her slogan, "Si se puede," yes we can.
Si se puede! Si se puede! Everybody!
The spirit of a people. Yes, we can.
There are now 7 elementary schools in California named after Dolores Huerta, and the state of California named a day for Huerta in the month of April. Even today, she is still a steadfast and tireless activist, still on the road, fighting for human rights, working to end racism, and advocating for education.
We have a lot of work to do in our country to make sure that democracy works, and it can work.
For this social justice champion, clearing a path for farm workers and minorities to succeed has been a crowning accomplishment. But like trailblazers who came before her, Huerta realizes the fight is never over.
We just got to sacrifice a little bit so that we can, make our world a better place.
Si se puede!
Dolores Huerta, a labor activist who struggled to break new ground for people across the country, still wants equal pay for women, health care for all, free education, and social justice.
When I meet farm workers and they see me, and the one thing that they always point out, the toilets in the fields. And I think when we translate that into dignity, giving farm workers the dignity that they deserve for the work that they do to feed our nation.
March is Women's History Month.
At JJ Safety, we're honored to bring awareness to the contributions women have made to the United States.
We are proud to recognize the achievements women have made over the course of America's history in a variety of fields.
As advocates, leaders, experts, professionals, dignitaries, and so much more. We are daughters, sisters,
mothers, friends, mentors.
We are a community.
And we are a family.
A family.
A family.
A family. And we're happy to join millions of other Americans in
celebrating and bringing awareness to the vital role
of women in American history.
For more content, subscribe to our channel and follow JJ Safety on our other media platforms.